Hi folks, welcome to this arpeggio tutorial. I hope you find it really useful. First of all, thanks a lot for purchasing and downloading it. There's going to be a wealth of information that I give away in this tutorial, so don't feel that you need to gather it all up in one watch through and have it all under your fingers in one go. That probably won't happen, so you just give yourself a break, just have a listen to it first maybe. Grab it with your guitar, steal a couple of arpeggios, and then try and work them into your playing. And then if you like some of the theoretical stuff as well, you can dig a little bit deeper by watching it over and over again. So, without further ado, let's have a look at example 1. So example 1, I'm going to be taking a look at a really frequently used chord in a lot of genres of music, and that's the dominant 7. Now if you're familiar with your major scale theory, you'll know that the dominant 7 is built from the 5th chord of a major scale. So let's say we're in the key of A major. There's our 5th. There's the chord that sits underneath it. So dominant chord sits at the 5th chord of any major scale, which basically means if you're playing it from a modal perspective, we're playing the 5th mode, which is Mixolydian. So in the key of A major, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's an E, so we're playing E Mixolydian over an E7 chord. And the dominant 7 chord is built from the following intervals, and this is the key thing to arpeggio playing really. The root note of the chord, the major third, that's the thing that gives it a happy sound. If we were playing a minor third, it would sound sad. So there's our major third. The 5th, so root, third, 5th, and then we've got a minor 7 interval. And that's the thing that really gives the dominant 7 its character. So they're the 4 notes that we're going to utilize in a 2-octave pattern. So let me show you what I mean by that, something you can move around. So we'll keep in E, but we'll utilize the 6th string. So we're going to go all the way up to the 12th fret. I'm going to put our little finger on the 12th fret, and the pattern looks like this, slow. Okay, so there we are, a little bit quicker. And all we're doing is we're repeating those first 4 notes. So we're playing root, major third, 5th, and then there's our minor 7. And then we're doing a slide up to the root again, that's the octave, major third, 5th, minor 7, and then the octave again. So let me give you the notes specifically. 12th on the E string, 11 on the A string, 9 on the D string, then we're hitting 12. And that's a hammer on. And then with the energy that we've created by hammering on, we're going to slide as well. So here we go. Hammer, slide with that energy. And you could come back down at that point if you want to play 1 octave. Okay, so we're going to carry on. And then this time we kind of go like a stepping down a stairs fashion. So we're kind of going 14, 13, 12, then 10 on the E string, and then hammering onto the 12 and pulling off and coming back down, slide, pull off. So there we are, that's a pretty standard, it's a place to start. If you haven't already got that arpeggio under your fingers in your head, that's one to definitely grab hold of, because if you think about how many times a dominant 7 chord is used, particularly in like a blues, 12-bar blues, they're all dominant 7s, aren't they? So there are 3 different arpeggiated chords that you could play over a 12-bar, and you don't have to play them at breakneck speed, but actually it's going to give your playing a little bit of a difference if you're just playing blues scale. You know, popping that arpeggio in on one of the chords is going to sound a little bit different and a little brighter. But that's not the example I want to show you. So that's basically the starting position. What I want to do is I want to show you ways you can get a bit more mileage out of that particular arpeggio. And it's almost like a little arpeggiate pattern within another pattern. So we're not going to change the notes here. But what we're going to do is get a little bit more mileage out of them. So let me show you that pattern. So that pattern's still using all the same notes, but what we're doing is just approaching them in different ways. So let me show you the first part. It goes 12, 10, and that's a pull off, the first one. 12, 10's a pull off. And on the next one, we've got a downstroke on 15, pull off to 12 on the B string, and then upstroke on the 13th fret of the G string, upstroke 14th fret of the D string. So you can see we're using a similar pattern as we did before. 12, 13, 14, 12. Okay, so carrying on, little finger takes over now, 14th fret. 14th fret on the G string, pull off to the 11th fret, then 12th fret on the D string, 14th fret on the A string, down to the 11th fret. So the pattern in total is 14, 11, 12, 14, and then 11, 12, 14, 11. And then we're nearly there now. So the next one is little finger, 12th fret, pull off to 9, upstroke on 11 on the A string, 12 on the E string, and then do that again. So you've got 9, 11, 12. And there we are, that's example 1. So that dominant 7 arpeggio can be played every time you see the chord 7. So let's say it was a B7 that you saw written down on a chord chart, for instance. You've got to find the note on the E string, so you use your chromatic scale, E, F, F sharp G, G sharp A, A sharp B, and then you play the pattern from that note. There was our first pattern, and then that variation. And that gives you room and leverage to move it round. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take that dominant 7 chord, we're going to keep within the dominant 7 framework, but what we're going to do is a different inversion of the same chord. So what I mean by inversions is you can play a chord in the pattern that we've just played it, in terms of the root of the chord, the major third, the 5th, the minor 7. The second inversion would be to start the whole thing off on the major third. So what we end up there, if I give you a shape, is something along the lines of this. So here's our E dominant 7. We've got that kind of pattern. And the beauty of having a couple of ways around these shapes is that you can see that if I want to play that dominant 7 arpeggio at this end of the fretboard, then I've got a shape I can do it in. I don't have to be up this end. And that makes a big difference. If you were playing, for instance, a 12 bar, as we said earlier, 12 bar blues in A. So our first one is A, and so we can play that shape here, can't we? And then our next chord is D. So we'd have to slide up to the 10th fret to get that one in. And then back to A. And now for E, we're going to have to go all the way up here. Then your D. And then back to A. So there's a lot of sliding around. I know it's one shape, but there's a lot of sliding around. If you decide to play it at its inversion, then you end up with something a lot closer to home. So here's your first chord again, A dominant 7. Now this time, if I play the inversion of D, rather than going up here to play it, it's here. So it's right next to where I already am, so it's much easier to finger. So and that works again obviously if you wanted to play the E. So it's all contained, isn't it? It's really easy to get your fingers around it. You haven't got to fly around the fretboard. And the same, we could have played the whole thing up here. It's just a completely different passage. So what I'm going to do is let me show you that shape before we go any further. So we're in E, E dominant 7. That's the one we've just done. This time we're down here, so we're at the 4th fret, and we start with our first finger on the 4th fret, which is G sharp, which is the major third of the chord. And the first note we play is a downstroke, and then we hammer on a minor third higher up to the B note, the 7th fret. That's the pattern. Now another hammer on there, so we've got hammer on 4 to 7, and we play downstrokes 5 and 6, and then we go 4 and 7 again, hammers, and then this time our second finger is at the 5th fret. There's our E. Okay, and then there's only one note on that string, and then we're playing the 4th and the 7th again on the E string, and that's a hammer. And once you get there, you can pull off, come back down. And it seems a bit weird to start with, but it's actually a really useful pattern, that. So now if you've got that under your fingers, the way to find it, if you wanted to say play that for the A7, this time rather than trying to figure them out on the top E string, we have to figure them out on the B string. So B is our open note, isn't it? C is there, that's our 1st fret, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. So let's go back to our first pattern again at E. And then when we had this one, didn't we? And so on and so forth. What we can also do is another little shape around that that's very useful. And the only difference between it really is the first part. So rather than playing, we play this little pattern. Because we're assuming that we're in the key of A major. All of these notes are fair game. So let me show you that one. It's one I use quite a lot. It's 12, 9, 10, 11, 9. And you can see my picking pattern. And we use the same, almost the same pattern, This is in terms of a shape, but this time we go up to the 15th fret on the B string. Okay, so that's a really quite a rapid way of playing it. Okay, and then the next one is what we did on example 1. It's that pattern again. And then finally just finishing off with the bottom end of the arpeggio. And that's it really. So there are 3 or 4 ways to play a simple dominant 7 shape that you can slot into lots and lots of different styles of music. As I said to you before, if you can get handy with those inversions, then you can really mix and match just around a simple 12 bar. So let me show you a few of those. Let's say we start, there's our first A, and then we could go to this D, and then back to our A, and then this E, this D, and this A, and this turnaround E, and then we could go up to here for our A again, and then we've got D here, and then you could mix and match in with some of those patterns. So you're getting quite a lot of leverage out of just a couple of shapes if you can understand where they are. And that means you need to know the names of the notes on the E string, if you don't already, and as many of the notes as you can remember on the B string as well. Okay, example 2 then is just going to use straight major. So we're going to think about this again. We'll keep in the key of A, and we'll treat this as chord number 1 of the key that we're in, because we're in A major. But what we're doing really is we're spelling out the chord again. So we've got a root, a major third, a fifth, and then the octave. So no 7th in this. Okay, and I'm not going to do it in the traditional. And we're not even going to completely sweep pick this. You don't have to sweep pick every arpeggio. An arpeggio is a chord laid out in single notes, not necessarily sweep picked. So let me give you the shape. It's one I use all the time in my playing. This time we're up at this version of a major chord. Again, we're using the B string as our guiding note for the start of the chord. So there's the B. There's drop down to A, B flat or A sharp, and there's A. Root, major third, fifth. And that's the little pattern I'm going to show you. And you can see I was picking it in different ways there. You can hammer them on as well. So, you know, you don't necessarily just have to sweep pick these. You don't have to get completely obsessed with sweep picking. The notes are the important thing here. So let me show you them. We start with the 5th of the chord. So it's the E, and it's up at the 12th fret with a little finger. And it's a pull off. So we pick it and pull off. Pick it and pull off. And then we're playing an upstroke to the A note on the B string, the 10th fret. Then we've got 9 on the G string, 11 on the D string, and 12 on the A string. Now you could just go back up it the same way. That's in a kind of sweeping fashion. Or you could do something different. And I quite like to pick out different notes in a different way on the way up. So I'm getting to the end of that pattern that we've just done, and then I'm going down stroke on the 9th fret on the G string, upstroke 11th fret on the D string, and then downstroke finally on the 10th fret on the B string. And you could come back down, so you'd have. And the key thing is to experiment. Once you've got those notes under your fingers, don't just think I have to play them sequentially. You know, have a play around with them. And that's where you're going to end up being more of an expressive musician and someone who is able to extemporize and improvise with the knowledge that you have already, rather than just following a set pattern every time. So to find this, you need to be able to know, like I say, the names of the notes on the B string, not necessarily instinctively, but if you can move it around and understand the chromatic scale, that's going to help you greatly. Now, if you don't know what the chromatic scale is, or indeed if you've struggled with any of this kind of major scale stuff, there are two really big lessons that are completely free on my YouTube channel. Go and check them out. They cover the chromatic scale completely. Then they harmonise major scale, so how we build chords from the major scale itself, and the modes. So lots of free theoretical lessons up on the YouTube channel for you to check out and use them in conjunction with this video if you wish to. So this is where we find it anyway. So our root note is on the B string. So that being A means this is an A major arpeggio. If you want to go kind of from low end to top end, then you can find the notes this way as well on the A string. So we're on the A string, 12th fret, so it's an A. So that's another way around it. And they're all movable, aren't they? So here's our E. So the more notes you can understand on all of the strings, the better for your playing, certainly from an intervallic perspective too. Okay, this example then, it uses diminished. We're not going to get too caught up here in the theoretical side of things from a diminished perspective, because this is more of a practical tutorial. But you can look up lots and lots of different stuff on the web in terms of the diminished, and I'll talk a little bit about it. This is the arpeggio I'm going to show you, and then again I'm going to show you a way to move that round, and also some other ways to traverse it rather than just a straight sweep pick. But here are the notes. Okay. And we're treating this over a minor 7 flat 5 chord, half whole diminished. I should say half diminished is what the chord is. And we're playing half whole as a scale. And then playing the arpeggio to suit it. And that chord only sits in one place in a major key as well, and it sits at the 7th. It's the leading chord. So it's the last chord in your scale. Let's say we've got C major scale harmonized in 7s. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7, B minor 7 flat 5, and then back to our C major 7 again. So over that chord is where we pop that diminished lick. And you can treat it, I mean, the diminished pattern, and this particular pattern will sit quite happily within harmonic minor as well. So and you can superimpose it over different things, but I'm not going to get too in depth about that now. I just want to give you the shape that you can use and have some fun with in your playing. So the notes are, we're going to start on B, and we're going to put our first finger on the B note on the E string, which is the 7th fret. That's the first note. Then we've got a hammer on, and then we've got a note on the A string, 8th fret. 9th fret on the D string, 7th fret on the G string, hammer to the 10th fret, then we've got our 3rd finger coming into play here on the 9th fret, 7th fret on the E string, hammer to the 10th. And then when you get to there, same again but backwards, so you pull off, upstroke to the 9th fret on the B string, 10th fret on the G string, pull off to the 7th fret, upstroke 9th fret, upstroke 8th fret, upstroke 10th fret, pull off to the 7th. It's quite a pretty arpeggio actually. And the beauty of this arpeggio is that you can, and the beauty of diminished harmony in any sense, is that you can move it around. This pattern anyway on the guitar is movable, and you can stay in the same key. So you can see I'm not changing the pattern of notes that I'm running, I'm just moving up 3 frets. And you can go down. So every 3 frets. And so on and so forth. Which means you can mix and match. So go up 1 and then down another. If you wish to. And one of the things I like to do with this is sort of come down it in step-like fashion that we used on the other examples. Which is a really nice way to resolve it. Okay, so let me show you that shape. So we're at the bottom end of that pattern that we used. That's the picking pattern, or the pattern that we're going to use. So it follows the same mentality as the one we used on the dominant 7. So it's 10, 7, 9, 10, and then we go back to 7. 9, 10, 7. That's the first part. And you can see where our 3rd finger is landing. We switch over and put our little finger there now and follow a different pattern. So we go 9, 6, 7, 9, 6, 7, 9, 6. Okay, and we're almost there now. This time, where our 1st finger is, our little finger jumps down right next to it to the 7th fret and pulls off. And actually we're in the bottom end of that pattern by this point. That's what we're going to play next. So 7, 4 on the G string, 6, 5. 4, 6, 5. So 7, 4, 6, 5, 4, 6, 5. And then down to the 7. And this is where we can either keep going down to the 4, or we could decide you're going to resolve it there, treating it as if you've started a position higher and you're going to resolve it to the A. Now, you don't necessarily have to resolve it to major. It will work quite happily with minor too. And this is where it leads into harmonic minor, because you've got that note, the leading note. So that diminished pattern, you can take parts of it and move it round. So there was our first part, wasn't it? 10, 7, 9, 10, 7. I can move that up or down every 3 frets if I wanted to. And you don't have to go even doing that sequentially. You could skip around and go, I'm going to go up to here. And it's the same with all of those patterns. And if you want to think about it, the people that are into string skipping, you've got some patterns here that you can move around quite nicely actually. So there's your first little bit you can do, because it's part of that pattern, isn't it? So you could play the 7th fret, 10th fret, 7th fret, 10th fret on the G and B string, G and E string should I say. And then if you are feeling stretchy, you can stretch out and grab the 13th fret on both of them. And if you are a little bit further down this end of the fretboard, you've got a bit more room to spare. You can even stretch out and use all 4 fingers on one string. That kind of thing, which is kind of rustic-cooly. So you don't necessarily have to use the arpeggio from a sweep pick perspective. Again, it's about thinking about those intervals and the tonality and applying it in a creative manner. Okay, so we've just looked at diminished. Another interesting scale to use and indeed chord is the augmented chord and the whole tone scale. And you can use, just like diminished, which I didn't mention earlier, you can use that over a dominant 7 chord. But I won't go into that here because it's not really a theoretical tutorial, it's more of a practical one, as I've said. You can also use the whole tone scale over a dominant 7 chord too. So what we're going to do is, rather than go into the theoretical stuff of that, I'm just going to give you an arpeggio shape you can use every time you see or hear a dominant 7 chord. So we're going to do a dominant 7. Doesn't matter where you want to play it. And we're going to start on the root of the note, the root of the chord should I say. And that's the little pattern we're going to play. And the notes that are being played are the root, the major 2nd, and there's our augmented 5th, minor 7, an octave. And I want to give you that just little rolling pattern to start with, because I'm going to use it a lot. Once you've got that shape and pattern under your fingers, you can get a load of little chord shapes out of it. Lots and lots of mileage just from that one little pattern. So I'll show you how I'm playing it. I'm picking the first note, then I'm hammering on. So I'm going 5, 7, downstroke on the 6, plucking the 5th, hammering on, pull off, upstroke, upstroke, pull off. Okay, you don't have to do it the same way I'm doing it. You could actually just hammer them all if you wanted to. So that's the shape we're going to move around. And because we're in good old whole tone, it means we can move it every 2 frets. And that means you've got loads of freedom. just the same old notes. Same old pattern, should I say. And that will work every time you see a dominant 7 chord. You can find the root, play that pattern, move it around every 2 frets. So that's a really quick win, actually. One of the things you can do is you can carry on with that pattern though, starting on the augmented note. So you can see I'm using the same pattern that I just used here, but I'm a string down and a fret higher. And you can move that round every 2. And this works really good for chordal stuff as well. If you wanted to play so you're not only getting some cool licks out of this, you're actually getting some quite interesting little chord shapes. So it's definitely worth getting under your fingers. So just to clarify, if we're in the key of, if we're playing the chord of A dominant 7, and we play whole tone from the root of that chord, that's where our pattern. And we can move both of those little shapes up or down a tone at a time, and obviously you can jump to whatever point you like on the fretboard if you're keeping to that same pattern. Another way of doing it is a full-on augmented arpeggio here, so let me show you that pattern. And this is a bit more of a stretch at this end of the fretboard, easier up here, but we're in A, so we'll keep to it. So this is what we would use over a dominant 7, a 7 plus if you like, an augmented 7. And that is basically root, major third, minor 7 interval with that raised 5th, the augmented. So let's have a go at that. And it's the same pattern that we just did. So we'll get to there. And then we carry on in this shape, which is 7, 6, 4, and you can see I'm using my first 3 fingers here because I need my little finger to do a stretch for me in a second, up to the 8. It's a lovely sounding arpeggio. You can see I'm using that same technique I used on the other examples. To get down it in a different way. And you can carry on as well. If you wish to, adding in that note there, which is the 9th. Okay, so this next example uses a specific key. So we're going to do something in something diatonically, which means of a key. So let's take the key of G major. So in that key, we've got the following chords. Well, this is what it sounds like as a scale first. Then we've got the following chords: G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, and then back to G. And obviously we make those all 7th chords. We'd have G major 7, A minor 7, B minor 7, C major 7, D dominant 7, E minor 7, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, and then back to G major 7. So we have got lots of chords there, and each one of them is built from notes from the scale. And each one of those chords could be treated as an arpeggio. And they'll all work over each other because they're all built from the same notes. So let's say it doesn't matter what chord's playing underneath. Let's say we had, and we kind of loop this chord, E minor 11. Just pop that down so we've got something to listen to. So we've just got a wash. It's not really kind of anything too rhythmical going on there. All of my arpeggios from every single chord will work over that chord, simply because they share the same key. And we're treating that particular chord is the 6th chord of this scale, which means the 6th mode, and that's Aeolian, which is actually natural minor. So we're in E natural minor. So I was just playing around with some of the shapes from that key's chords. So let me just stop the looper for a second. So I played this then. And that's really simple. It's like a little pattern within that particular major key, which you could then move around. And I came up with that just by looking at all of the different shapes that were available to me in a major key. And that's something you could easily do by sitting down, not necessarily even with a guitar, but just actually mapping out the notes and looking at different ways to play the same scales. So the first one is kind of starting on, definitely starting on C, but like I say, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to play a C chord underneath it. We're just playing notes here from the scale. But let me show you the patterns and see if you can steal any of these. So the first one is like a 9th chord from C, and I'm playing the 3rd fret on the A string, 5th fret on the D string, 7th fret on the G string. And then I'm coming down, 4th fret, 5th fret on the D string, and then the 7th fret on the A string. So it's almost like a little seesaw. Okay, the next one, because I'm going up the scale diatonically, is on the 5th fret, then the 7th fret, 9th fret, so we've got that same pattern again. But this time I'm not going to there because that's not actually a note from the scale. This is, so I'm playing. Okay. And you don't have to play them as arpeggios, they work as nice little, musical things, musical chords. So always try to keep things musical if you can. Okay, so that's where we've got to. The next one, starting on the E, and that is the 7th fret, the 9th fret, and the 11th fret. So again, these little 9th shape moving its way up. Root, 5th, 9th. So we've got 7, 9, 11, this time 7, 9, 10. And this time you'll hear a bit of diminished because we're on the leading note of the G major scale, the F sharp, and it's 9, 12, 10, 9, 12. So if you're thinking of it in chordal terms, we've got C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished. That's where we're up to. There's our next one, which is the G, because we've done F sharp diminished. So now we need our G. And that's 10, again a ninth. So we've got 10, 12, 14, 11, 12, 14. So from the beginning. Okay, the next one after G, second chord in the scale, A minor. Again, ninth, so we're going 12, 14, same shape, 12, 14, 16, 12, 14, 15. Okay, so we've got this now. And obviously you can carry on, you can mix and match those as you see fit. And if you look at the major scale, those notes were all taken from G major, as I've said. If you wanted A, you could move them all up by a tone. If you wanted A sharp, you could go again a semitone, and so on and so forth. It's quite simple, really. But I would encourage you to map out the fretboard on in a particular scale, and then look for patterns yourself. Here's another one that you could use. That works again in the same key, so still in G major. And that appears in a couple of places. I can show you that. That's 12, 7, 10, 12, 7, 9, 12, 7. And the chord itself that we're actually mapping out is kind of an E minor 11 chord, because we're using the 11th. It's suspended as well. We've got the 4th. So we've got root, perfect 5th, perfect 4th, minor 3rd, the minor 7, 5th, there's our 11th, the A, and then we're back down to the E. So you could take all those different patterns, mash them up together, and come up with some really interesting melodic lines as well, and phrases. If you keep looking at the major scale, what you'll notice are those kind of lots of repeating patterns, and then you can utilize those to your own advantage, which is really helpful. One of the patterns that repeats a lot in a major key, because we've been speaking about G major, let's keep it there, is this shape. So let me give you the tab for that, if you like. So it's first finger on the 2nd fret of the G string, 2nd finger on the 3rd fret of the B string, and then little finger on the 5th fret of the E. That's the shape, and that appears in loads of different positions within a major key. And for G major, it's here, using the G string as our guide, the 2nd fret, the 4th fret, the 7th fret, the 9th fret, the 11th fret, the 12th fret, and then up at 14, which is the octave. And just taking the root notes from the harmonised chords of the scale, you've got G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, haven't you? That's the scale. And chord-wise, we've got a G major, we've got A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, back to G, and then you can play them adding the ninths, couldn't you? So you could have like a typical power chord, you know, you root and 5th, and then you could add in that ninth. as we were doing it. So if we play those three notes, which are 3, 5 and 7, and then drop down to that pattern we were just looking at, which is the 2nd, the 3rd and the 5th, and then we can move that around, can't we? So we can keep this the same, so we're keeping the same chord as a root note. We can move to these other positions. And that's a really, you can come up with some really crazy ideas in relation to that. And then you could keep these the same and keep moving the bass notes. So you could have something like this. And then you could move that round, and you could move the bass notes round. So let's move up to C. And then move up to E. So we could have two positions. Say we were doing this. And then up to E. And so all I'm doing there, I mean, it looks quite crazy, but you've got these shapes that I'm moving around wherever I want to, within the particular scale that I'm in, which is G major. And I'm picking out that same pattern every time at the bass end. And then just these different shapes, or the same shape but moved around, that exist on the major scale. So just knowing the major scale, just knowing your scale, and knowing those patterns, you can come up with some really interesting shapes and patterns to put into your playing at will. So that was the diatonic approach. What about something that's non-diatonic? What about something that's just completely wacky, for want of a better term? And there's plenty of those out there. Something like this. I've used that before in a tune, just kind of as an interlude, as a build-up to a solo, or just to play outside a little bit. And things like this. And it's that kind of chromatic approach to things. You get a lot of sax players that will play those kind of lines, John Coltrane type stuff. So let me show you those three examples. So this one starts on the 12th fret. It's a really good exercise actually for your fingers. We're playing this shape, which is 12, 13, 14, and then again 12, 13, 14. And then when I get to the end, I'm going up by a semitone and then coming down. So you get that kind of circular motion. And then the other shape that I was playing there was doing this. So we're kind of going downstairs like that and moving up by a semitone each time. So what we've got there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. So on and so forth. And then the final one I did there, you can hybrid pick this if you like. I like to hybrid pick it or finger pick it. and I'm playing that with a hammer on at the beginning. So playing the 2nd fret on the D string, which is an E, and I'm hammering 3 frets higher, and then I'm plucking those 2 notes below it. So I've got 2, hammer to 5, play 5, play 5, and I'm going up by a semitone. And I like the tone that I get from actually plucking those with my fingers rather than using the pick to do it. But you can do whatever you like with that. And thinking outside of the key like that, thinking in a non-diatonic way, will help you to really come up with some interesting things. And don't get me wrong, you wouldn't want a whole song of it, but just interludes between a solo and a melody, or just for something quirky in the middle of a solo. It's great to kind of think a little bit outside of the boxes that we constrain ourselves in when we learn scale patterns. And if you dig a little deeper into this subject yourself and start to have a look on the fretboard when you take a completely different scale, so we've been looking quite heavily at the major scale and some of its movements. We dipped our toe into whole tone and to diminished, but if you can imagine how many more patterns and shapes there are out there, if you dipped your toe into that and started to dig a little deeper, you might find that you come up with something really interesting and unique. So that would be my final parting advice to you, really, would be to go out and find some of these for yourself. Certainly get these under your fingers, but let them inspire you to go out and explore new ones for yourself.